Good afternoon. My name is Michael Byers. I'm a professor of international relations and international law here at UBC. And along with Aaron Bowley, I am a co-director of the Outer Space Institute. We're meeting today on the traditional unceded land of the Coast Salish peoples, and we're talking about outer space. This lecture is the first annual John S. MacDonald Outer Space Lecture. John MacDonald was an incredibly influential person in the development of space technology, engineering, policy, industry in Canada. Some 52, 53 years ago, he founded MacDonald Detweiler in, I believe it was a basement near UBC. I'm looking at his wife, Alfred MacDonald, who's here in the front row. Thank you so much for coming. John MacDonald created the company that built the Canada arm and built the RadarSat series of satellites and a whole bunch of other impressive and important things. He was very encouraging to Aaron and myself when we were in the very early stages of establishing the Outer Space Institute, and this lecture is our way of saying thank you to him. Also really pleased that the sponsor of this annual lecture is MDA, formerly MacDonald Detweiler and Associates, and I see Minda Suchan, who is the VP Geointelligence for MDA, I believe the senior executive here in the Lower Mainland. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for the support of your company for this lecture. The Outer Space Institute is a little bit different from other institutes, other institutions. We are a global network of experts working in transdisciplinary ways on cutting-edge grand challenges facing humanity in space. So things like space debris, for instance, or planetary defense. We try to bring people together to share ideas, share expertise, share different perspectives on current problems. And that extends to the events that we organize like this. You will have lots of time to ask questions. Our moderator and our guest are going to have a conversation for the first 20 minutes or so, and then it's open to you. There'll be a roving microphone on either side of the audience, so put up your hand when you want to ask a question. Our guest is going to keep his responses relatively short, so you should all get a chance. It's a dialogue involving all of you. And that then brings us to, well, first of all, our moderator. Ellyne Kinney is a senior engineer and I believe director of technology technology strategy yes. At MDA. Ellyne is a fellow of the Outer Space Institute and a very valued colleague and collaborator in what we do, and absolutely thrilled that she'll be moderating this evening. And beside her is Jan Wörner. And you all know who Jan Wörner is because you filled out the Eventbrite invitation to come here this evening. He is a civil engineer by training who became a leading academic administrator in Germany at Technische Universität Darmstadt, and then president of the European Space Agency, which is something he's going to explain to you in a few minutes, a remarkable organization. He is now the president of the German Academy of Sciences and Engineering, a very distinguished guest. But perhaps most notably, Jan Wörner is someone who gets things done and speaks his mind. And his time at the European Space Agency was like a breath of fresh air to people like me who appreciate when people in positions of power and influence actually tell the truth and
Which is dangerous.
and explain what they're doing in ways that others can understand. And it was obvious to Aaron and myself that Jan Wörner was the perfect person to invite to be the inaugural John S. MacDonald Outer Space Lecturer. I'm also pleased to announce that he recently accepted an invitation to be a fellow of the Outer Space Institute. And so we grow our network in wonderful ways. So without further ado, Ellyne, the evening is in your hands.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Jan, welcome. We are thrilled to have you join us. And for folks that may not be aware, could you tell us a little bit about what the European Space Agency is, why it's important, how it works?
Ellen Michael said I should be short, but that is already a challenge for that. First of all, I would like to thank, of course, all of you for being here, also for the sponsor, and also for you that you really take the task to interview me. So ESA, the European Space Agency, that's a very special beast. It was created in 1975, so this is in the last century, just to remember you and remind you. And it was developed in order to focus all the European space activities in one body. At that time, there were two bodies beforehand, which was ELDO and ESRO. One was more for launchers, the other one for space research, and they were merged in 1975. To ESA, the European Space Agency. And the convention which was written then, the law, is still valid today without any change. This is a masterpiece of legal people. Really, it's a masterpiece of lawyers. Yeah, it's a masterpiece, but nothing has changed. So the number of member states grew. We have now 22 member states, plus Canada. Canada has a very special status. Unfortunately, Canada is not European, and it's in the convention that you have to be a European country. So therefore, Canada has a very special point, but it is really accepted as a full member in all the different discussions. Now, I have to a little bit explain also some things about that, because there's one very special rule at ESA. So you see, we have different countries, different sizes. Let's see, France and Germany, the two biggest ones, having something like more than 40% of the money contributing to ESA. And we have Estonia or Portugal, which are in the range of 1%. So how to handle this? This is one of the tasks of the Director General. And the number one is what I always said, and this was also not so easy for some people, especially not for the Germans and the French. I said, one country, one vote. So they did not like that. Okay, that's fine. I'm still alive. So, but there is a rule, a very special rule, which is called geo-return, geographical return. So if the Director General, every 3 years, he has to go to the ministers, or the ministers come to him, and he proposes a plan. Let's say he proposes to go to the moon, just as an example, and gives a price tag for that. Let's say 400 million Canadian dollars, just as an example. But we have to count in euros. But anyhow, take 400 million Canadian dollars. And then the different member states can say what is the percentage they are ready to pay for this mission. And it's for the Director General to come as close as possible to 100%, of course. And the member states, if they now say, for instance, 20%, I pay 20%, then this is signed and fixed. And that means when we give later on contracts to companies, 20% of the value has to go to exactly that country. This makes it interesting also for smaller countries. Not to be forgotten, but to say, okay, even 1%, I pay 1%, and I will get 1% overall, but maybe 20% in that project or 1% in that project, get back in my country. So even the smaller countries can build up space industry. So I should stop at this point, otherwise I'm talking only about the institution.
And so the idea is that when member states invest, that they then get money back to help
Not the
support.
member states, the industry in that. So the money is given to ESA, And then ESA opens a tender, and then we have to make sure that the percentage which the country pays goes overall back to that country. I say percentage, and this is a trick of a Director General. I could have said also in my example, 400 million, 20% is 80 million. I could have said if a country pays 80 million, they get back. No, they don't get back 80 million. Because Director General's salary, etc., etc.
Yes.
So all the operation costs of ESA is reduced first, and therefore they get the percentage back, not the overall the absolute number.
Yes. And so one of the things you mentioned is how the members vote and decide policy, and you mentioned one country, one vote. What are the types of decisions that the member states help drive?
Oh, there are many decisions. There are decisions. So, for instance, when we have this debate about the money, finally, the program, which is, let's say, again, the trip to the moon, has to be certified, has to be verified by the member states. There are different situations. Normally, we have unanimity in all cases where we are talking about money. A very simple rule, because you cannot decide by majority that one country has to pay more money. You cannot do that. So therefore, it's done by unanimity, but other decisions are by 2/3 majority, sometimes double 2/3, which sounds very strange. That means 2/3 of, and then it comes the votes, and 2/3 of the money, which I don't like. But this is also, both exist.
All right, okay.
Yeah. And then also, for instance, the Director General is elected by the member states. The Director General proposes then directors for Earth observation, for navigation, for telecommunication, and he needs, or she needs, always confirmation of the member states. So the member states are very strong, and the Director General is very strong. In our convention, there is a sentence: ESA has two organs, the ESA Council, these are the member states, and the ESA Director General. No other organs are defined.
Okay.
Only the two.
And then how many member states comprise ESA right now?
Right now, 22. It's complicated to become a member state. You cannot say, I want to be a member state. First of all, by unanimity, it has to be decided, and then it takes several years, because if, for instance, a country like Croatia, would like to be directly a member state, they don't have industry right now. So therefore, ESA has a very special program for the first years to build some industry in that country. And therefore, it takes several years, and then they can become a full member.
Very good. And so I imagine it's a bit challenging for the Director General to get everybody agreeing.
If you don't put it to press, I say it's fun.
Okay.
It's really fun.
Okay.
Because it's joy or fun, whatever you say. It's really, challenge is for me a little bit too negative. It is a challenge, but to get all of them really online for a certain program, and then that they are happy with this is for me was always a very satisfying activity.
So what are some of the key initiatives that are going on in the European Space Agency right now?
Yeah, so when I became Director General, I thought, first of all, we have a shift of paradigm from purely institutional and public money to more and more commercialization. That was now some 7 years ago. And I said, this is something ESA has to take into consideration. And the other thing is, if you ask your question, or if you ask that question some, let's say, 8 years ago, even a person of ESA would not react in a comprehensive way. So therefore, I structured all what ESA is doing in 4 pillars. One is science and exploration. Exploration for ESA means human and robotic exploration. Science means for us to look for dark matter, dark holes, black holes, whatever. Yeah, and then we have safety and security in space and from space. So we will come later on to debris, things like that. The third pillar is all the applications: Earth observation, navigation, telecommunication. And the fourth pillar, I named it enabling and support, and you can imagine that I got very harsh criticism for that, but for me, a launcher is just an enabler. It is not a value in itself. It is an enabler to go to space.
Oh, wow.
And an operations center is an enabler. It's not itself space. The applications is where space is done. The science and exploration is where space activities are done, and also the safety and security part. So therefore, these are the 4 pillars where ESA is active.
And so what are some of like the really exciting missions going on that people sort of say, oh wow, that's space?
Now I'm not any longer Director General, therefore I can be a little bit more open, because when I was a Director General I said I cannot answer that question because I love all of them.
Yes,
yes. But for instance, what I believe is really fascinating is LISA. LISA is a mission which is planned for the next, should be realized in 10 years' time, so not today, with gravitational waves. And this will open up another way of understanding the universe. And we said it will bring sound to the movie. This is how we gave it a narrative. So that means you have the normal observation in all the different frequencies, plus the gravitational wave, so you get sound to the movie. Okay. Yeah, that was how we always tried to have some narratives. I think LISA is something which is really impressive. But also if you look to Bepi Colombo, Bepi Colombo is a mission which goes to Mercury. We are all discussing right now about electric mobility. I mean, Bepi Colombo, that is electric mobility. It has an ion thruster, so it accelerates ions, and by that it goes to Mercury. And as Michael was saying, I'm a simple civil engineer, so I thought, okay, here's the sun, here's the Earth, okay, we have here Venus and Mercury, so it should be easier just to go towards the sun and you will be there. And I calculated and said, okay, we should do it in less than 2 months. Because of the gravitation of sun. They said, yes, you can do it. Either you hit the planet or you hit the sun. Both is not what we wanted to do. And therefore, the name Bepi Colombo comes from an Italian physicist or astrophysicist who developed a way how to go to Mercury. And it takes 7 years, 9 billion kilometers, and without recharging, so that's electric mobility, you see?
Yes, yes.
And it has the biggest solar panels I ever saw. The solar panels are as big as the wings of an Airbus 320. And the question is, why is it? I said, that's stupid. You go to the sun and you need bigger solar cells? That's ridiculous. I always ask these questions in order to get more information. And the answer is very simple. If you go like this towards the sun, you are the sun for me now.
Yes, yes.
You are the sun in my life. That's good.
Yes.
Okay, so if I fly towards you like this, you will burn my wings. Therefore, they are inclined like this, and that means the efficiency is going down. So they are the most efficient solar cells so far in space, but they have to be tilted because of the sun, and that means the size is as huge, as I said. So therefore, Bepi Colombo is excellent. And it also shows that ESA is trying always not only to cover all the member states of ESA itself, but also it's a cooperation with other countries. So for instance, in that case, Japan is a very strong partner in Bepi Colombo. Bepi Colombo is 3 spacecrafts in one. One is the thruster, which I mentioned already, with xenon. I think something like 450 kilograms of xenon. And this is a good part of the production of xenon worldwide per year. And the second thing is there is a satellite of Japan and then also one of ESA. So this is typical for ESA, that we always try to cooperate also with states outside the ESA garden.
Oh, okay.
Fences, no fences.
No fences.
No fences.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, you mentioned that Canada is a special member of ESA. So how does that work? How does a country outside of Europe be a part of the European Space Agency?
Yeah, so you are for us not as I mentioned right now with Japan. Japan, that was a very special contract. that we filled, and then they could contribute normally without flow of money. So with Canada it's different, because Canada, you can be a real partner in each and every project. You can also sign up for part of the money, so you have a very strong role in that, and therefore Canada can and is doing also cooperation in other projects, which is always very fine, yeah. And we have Canada also at our table in the council. We don't have Japan, JAXA, we don't have, but
Right.
Canada is at the table.
And so what are some of the ways that Canada has contributed substantially to ESA's mission?
Of course I mentioned now the Canada, that's
Yes, of course.
but that was a contribution not to us, but to the International Space Station. And of course also the data from Landsat and others. These are things where we really, really glad. And then in many other projects there is technology from Canada involved. So there are many different projects where we have Canada on board.
Mm-hmm. And so looking forward, you mentioned Canada-ARM, you mentioned the data processing for Landsat, which Canada contributed to the beginning initial application for.
Yeah.
What are some things in the future where Canada could truly bring something unique to the table?
So this is, first of all, I heard that, of course, the Canadian government decided to support the gateway for several years. This is a very important contribution, and I think it was the first country outside the US which signed for that. So this is very important, because I believe the moon can be for us a very important part because of several reasons. Number one, because of science. The moon most probably exists because of an impact of another body with the Earth, and the moon is something like an archive, because it has no flora, no fauna, no earthquake, no big earthquake, also no big moonquakes. It's just very stable, and so we can learn a lot about our Earth from the moon. It's always said it should be a stepping stone to go further into the universe. This is a point where I doubt a little bit whether we will do that in the next 20 years. But anyhow, there's one more point which I believe is very important, and this is the global cooperation. We have it in the International Space Station, and we will have it on the moon and around the moon in the gateway. And this is something where I'm really very sad right now because of the Ukraine situation, that this cooperation with Russia is really totally interrupted. This is, it's not nice.
Yes. And so, since you've brought it up, what do you see the impact of global crises like the war in Ukraine, like the pandemic?
Don't take me cynically. I try to be as open as possible because I think it's important. So we made an analysis of this, of the situation. So we have the situation with climate change. We have the situation with Ukraine. We have the situation with coronavirus. 3 crises, more or less. And what we see in each of these crises is, yes, we have to tackle it, we have to find solutions, but by that we are developing much quicker in some areas than we would do without the crisis. I know it sounds a little bit strange, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. I don't like the Ukraine war, of course not. It's terrible what Putin is doing over there. And I can tell you, I met Putin several times, and what I always said when I came back, I said, he is so cold in his eye, but I never thought that he will do something like that. So, but this is so terrible, so we should have all our sympathy with the Ukrainian people. But at the same time, we learn that there is something to be done to be really resilient as a society, not only in technological things, but also as a society, because democracy is also a very vulnerable situation. So we are not automatically stable because we get the votes from the people. So therefore, I think there is a lesson from the Ukraine crisis which is beyond technology, sovereignty, innovation, etc. It's also safety and security both, for the societal situation and the stable democratic system. I think this is, for me, it's a very important lesson.
And so you mentioned a couple of times how space really can contribute to the safety and security of life on Earth. How does space help us here on Earth?
I always use Simon and Garfunkel and said, space is a bridge over troubled water. Because I thought that's really, and I'm really now in a situation that I said, not always. I showed normally a slide where I have a bridge. It's a very fragile bridge, and I say, as a civil engineer, I could build a better bridge, but I believe that space is really a fragile bridge. This is what I always said. Now I was right, because right now it is destroyed. But just the cooperation, think about, we go back in time, maybe I'm the only one in the room who can go back so far, 1975, Soyuz Apollo rendezvous and docking, that was totally amazing. I was already old. I was, how old was I? 20 years, 21 years. So I was really fascinated that it's possible, even in Cold War situation. I was living close to the border of East Germany, but I could observe that Russia and the United States of America could suddenly do rendezvous and docking. This was really an eye-opener for me. And so after that, we had more and more cooperation. You see, we had for many years after the Columbia and Challenger accident, when the shuttle was stopped, we all were looking just to Soyuz launches. I was in Baikonur several times. In 2014, I was also invited for a launch, and that should be Alexander Gerst, who in Germany is seen to be a German astronaut. I always say no. By the way, this is also something which does not make the Germans happy. I say it's a European astronaut with a German driver license. So this is, and so I should go to Baikonur for his first launch. Mm-hmm. And I was very much afraid, because in 2014 that was the Crimea conflict. Yes. So I thought you cannot go to Baikonur. You will be stopped in Moscow already. You have to go through Moscow. And it was very easy. I went to Moscow and finally to Baikonur, and NASA was there, and the Europeans were there, and the Russians, and we had an excellent, not only an excellent launch, but also very nice discussions. Also, we had the Crimea conflict directly in the news. And so that was my feeling, okay, with space we can really bridge earthly crisis, also in the future. Right now with the Ukraine war, we could not go further in that direction, so all the programs of ESA with the Russians were stopped. From both sides, by the way. Also the Russians moved away from there. They can launch Soyuz also from French Guiana. Yes. And they stopped that also. Mm-hmm. So it's really bad. And I could give you, I still had some contact with the head of the Russian space agency after the 24th of February, but I will not quote him. What he wrote to me was so terrible, aggressive. He said, Jan, you are not allowed to say anything because your father may have killed my relatives in World War II, fascists, and he said, you will see if you don't behave, we will do it again as 1945 in Berlin, and something like this. So it was really terrible. Right. So therefore, my hope is a little bit gone, but I think we are right now seeing that all these problems more or less come from, let's say, less than a handful of people. Right. And therefore my hope is that we will come to a better situation, and that then maybe space can be the part which is again bridging all these crises.
Okay. Well, thank you. That is a very profound and
you can criticize me.
It's
also
a hopeful view, hopeful even in the face of difficulties.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the same is with climate change. I mean, yes. We are learning through climate change now to have new technologies. Huh? And the same is with the pandemic situation. Suddenly, digital transformation is not any longer something for nerds, right. But for each and everybody.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Maybe it's a good time for us to break open for questions from the audience.
You can have comments, you can shout or whatever. I'm ready. I'm old enough to withstand.
Check, check. So something you said was a key and interesting thought, which was there's got to be within the European Space Agency, just having that diversity, something unique that's come out of that. I mean, with Canadian Space Agency, with NASA, with others, a collection of a single nation with sometimes partners, but to have a truly diverse group of people with different ideas. Can you recall at any time where you came away saying, this couldn't have happened anywhere else? This is an output of a truly diverse and innovative group of people that came together to do this thing that I don't think could be transplanted anywhere.
That's a very good point. When there was, some years ago, it was maybe worldwide, there was some discussion about diversity, and we must have diversity and we should go for diversity. It was always meant to be the gender diversity, but it was said. And I always said, this is the wrong wording. It's not that we must or we should. It is to our best because it's an asset. Diversity is a very big asset. It's an asset to have women and men. It's an asset to have young and old. It's also an asset to have with different origin or with different education. And I can tell you, an Estonian engineer is different to a South Italian engineer or Greek engineer. They are different, and this is really the beauty. I mean, you are doing the same in the States, and maybe also in Canada. You have also plenty of different people, but in our case, it's more or less it's automatically that we have it. We had to fight for more diversity concerning women and men. This is still a deficit in ESA, but it's interesting. We could compare it also country-wise, and this is very different from country to country in Europe. So therefore, diversity is for me an asset. That's the final word to your remark.
We have somebody over here in the center.
I have two questions, actually, if that's all right.
Sure, please.
I was wondering, first of all, you mentioned Canada as sort of having a special part, but how did that come about? And I was also wondering if there is like collaboration with other countries, like with Japan, for example. How was that agreement made? Like how does that negotiation first come to form?
So one has to understand that each and every country as a member state of ESA can also work outside ESA, which is for a Director General not a funny thing. I tried, but I failed, because in the convention it says that all the national programs of the different member states should finally be merged into ESA. It is in the convention, and the convention is not just as a football club, something like that. It's an international treaty, so it's you have to follow, but the member states don't follow. Now, yeah, it is like that. Now with Canada, it's a little bit different, because Canada is not the same. It's not a member state as such. It has a special status. Therefore, Canada is, so to say, even more free than the others. But it's the one and only country we have in that direction. I can tell you, we tried another country. We tried to get Australia in, but they were very much oriented towards United States of America, and so they did not come closer. We have some relation, but they did not come closer. So if we have a program like, for instance, Bepi Colombo, and Canada wanted to also to provide something, then this will be discussed, and it will be, if it's agreed, then it's done. It's not that you called it challenge. I said again, it's joy or fun to embrace another country. In Canada, in case of Canada, it's easy. because the member states know they can trust Canada, it's part of ESA, blah, blah, blah. While if we go to other countries, now I mentioned a totally different country, China, then you can imagine that is sometimes rather difficult because of IPRs, etc.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I was just wondering, does the ESA have much collaborations with the European Union? And I suppose in the same vein, does it concern itself with climate change? Because the European Union does have policies with relation to that. And I guess ESA is a space agency, but does it concern itself in any way?
Okay, so this is really... So ESA is, as I said, is based on an international treaty. So ESA is independent. ESA, is not EU. I have a diplomatic passport as a Director General of ESA. Yeah? And so ESA was there since 1975. Now, the treaty, as I said earlier, is saying that the member states should even move their programs into ESA. It says that ESA should make the strategy for Europe in space. Everything is in the convention. And then in 2008 and 2009, the European Union decided in Lisbon to have also activities in space. Now, this was and is still a conflict. And during my term as Director General, the conflict was really very hard. With my successor, it's much easier. He worked for some time at the European Union, so he is closer to the EU and especially to the European Commission. The European Commission, that is, so to say, the government of the European Union. It's called Commission, but they did not want them to call them ministers because that would be too high. So therefore, the member states of the European Union decided to call them commissioners. So the commissioners are ministers. So in this commission, the government said, okay, we will do, and then they decided for different projects in space. This was in conflict with ESA. Now, the first step was the Copernicus program. Copernicus program is an Earth observation program, and the agreement was done already with my predecessor that ESA will say, okay, we will produce Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2, these satellites, and the member states could sign for it, and the same rule as I explained before. And then they will get the contracts in their country. And for all these Sentinels, there are always Sentinel-A and Sentinel-B, meaning Sentinel-A is the first, and Sentinel-B is more or less then a copy of Sentinel-A. And of course, if the full consortium of through ESA is defined for Sentinel-A, and then Sentinel-B is paid directly by the Commission, it's obvious that it will be the same countries. That means suddenly, for 10% participation, you get 20% back. I don't know whether it's clear what I'm saying. So that means they love it. They love this program, and they always oversubscribe. Not only 100%, but 120%. We suddenly had to fill something. We had to find something what we can do even with that money. So this was Copernicus. That was the starting point. The second point was Galileo. I know everybody knows GPS, but there is another one which is called Galileo. It's three times better than GPS. I did not say that, but if you have a mobile phone or whatever, you get both data at the same time. So Galileo, the situation was different. ESA had a navigation program, but the Commission decided that the Galileo satellites should be directly in the hands of the Commission. That means ESA is doing the procurement, but the Commission is paying for it, and therefore this geographical return does not exist. Now, this was getting more and more difficult because the Commission then said we will do a strategy for space, which is against the convention of ESA. Now the smart people were saying, Jan Wörner, you are stupid, because the convention is from 1975, while the EU decision is from 2008. Of course, it's newer, so the new one governs the old one. But this is wrong, because they are not the same member states. We have 22 member states in ESA and 27 in the EU. And there are member states in the EU which are not in ESA, Croatia, Slovakia, blah, blah, blah. And there are member states who are in ESA but not in the EU, for instance, UK, Switzerland, Norway. So you cannot, by another decision, overrule a different group. That's my very simple understanding. Therefore, this situation is still very complicated. Last year, the EU and ESA signed a financial framework partnership agreement, complicated word and a complicated content. So it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And some countries love the EU method because, for instance, France has the strongest space industry. So through EU in open competition, they get more than they would get in ESA, where they have to pay for each and everything. So, but it depends country by country.
Right. Okay.
You've spoken mostly about what ESA does sort of within the member states. Can you speak about its role as that independent actor on the more global stage of trying to promote adherence to existing more global multilateral international treaties on space, and or trying to develop new ones and identify for us what are the key initiatives of ESA as an advocate for much more multilateral sorts of norms in space might be on your agenda?
In which area do you mean? Overall, in which area ESA is doing?
Anything. What are the top priorities, for example? Is it weapons in space that you're concerned about, or do you even get involved in that because it's not one of your 4 pillars? Are you an advocate for that, or other norms of much more global multilateral nature, not the regional in ESA?
Yeah. So the 4 pillars are really the foundation of what ESA is doing. And then within these areas, ESA tries, of course, not to be just another player, but also to set points. I mean, this mission to Mercury is really, it stands alone. It's only that. Of the mission Rosetta to Churyumov-Gerasimenko to this comet was also something like that. Nobody did it before. So ESA is sometimes doing things like that. Where ESA started relatively early is also the question of space debris. So to go into a sustainable use of what we call space, because space is an infrastructure. And this is something which I also tried very much to promote with real dollars or euros, because when I came into ESA, there was already an initiative, but it was something like for 500K or so. It was not really money in that sense. And so I proposed for the last ESA ministerial, this is the meeting which I explained before, I proposed for space safety a full program consisting of solar flare identification, of asteroid impact, an asteroid impact program, and for space debris removal. And it was interesting, the reactions of the politicians was always the same. Number 1, for solar flare and asteroid impact, will it happen during my term? You are laughing, but this was the real question. I mean, you can explain how important, how dangerous a solar flare is. I mean, you in Canada, you know the beauty of solar flares, the northern lights, but it can be, and you had in 1989, you had in Quebec, solar flare which destroyed even the transformer,
Yes.
the nuclear, not a nuclear, but a power plant. So hydropower plant, yeah.
Hydropower plant, yeah.
Yeah, so you know what it is, but for Germans or French, they did not accept that. I had to explain the Canadian example, I had to explain the example of Texas in 1869, and so on and so on. So this was very difficult because they said, will it happen and when? Number two, the question of asteroid impact. If you come up and say the dinosaurs died out because of asteroid impact, they said, yeah, happy so, good so. So they don't accept that as a direct issue. And the third one, the space debris removal, they say it's not our waste. So this is very, very stupid answers, and as you see my wording, you will not become a friend of politicians if you talk like that. But still I shave myself in front of the mirror. So these are things which are really now on the landscape and which changed really the way ESA is working. And for the space debris, we had several things at the same time. So we had one method with using artificial intelligence to avoid collisions of satellites in the future. We had one removal program, and that was interesting. We asked industry very broadly. We said, okay, you get a list of all the ESA-owned assets in space, which we don't use any longer. You can select one. We gave some conditions, at least 100 kilogram, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter now. And you have to bring it down within 5 years, and you give us a full service price. This was also for ESA new, because normally they do micromanagement during the whole process. I said, no, we will get one price, and for that price they have to do it. So it was new that we go for debris removal, and it was new that we go for a full service price. But then suddenly during the program, we learned something more. We have in Europe, we have the Ariane launcher and the Vega launcher. The Vega launcher is a smaller launcher, the Ariane is a big one. And even in the smaller one, normally there are 2 satellites for one launch. So you have 2 satellites, and you have between the 2 satellites, you have an adapter, which is called Vespa, like the Vespa. That's the adapter between the 2 satellites. Now if you fly, and you put the first satellite in orbit and then the second satellite in orbit, it's obvious that the Vespa remains in orbit. So this company selected a Vespa to be removed. The winner of this competition was a Swiss company, also interesting. Swiss is a small contribution, but we could convince them. So they were winning. Then the different countries had to adjust to the ideas of the geographical return. We did it the other way around. So they had to follow what the company was saying. But then the company showed us their plan, and I was shocked myself. It was really that I discovered it. They said, okay, we will fly with a Vega launcher. I said, with a Vega launcher? Yes, as a second payload. I said, you fly with a Vega launcher as a second payload? Here is the Vespa, which you would cover, but you see there's another Vespa. So they would bring up one Vespa and would bring down my Vespa, and I said, this is not acceptable, we will not do that. So, in addition to the commercial activities, in addition to the space debris removal activity, we had a third action, and that means space debris avoidance. So this Vespa, which will fly, will have its own engine to be deorbited by itself. So therefore, this was for me at the end, it was 3 in 1.
Yes.
Was it understandable?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Good.
We have a question over here.
Hello, thank you. It's such an interesting conversation. I work in the aviation industry, and I'm really curious. I love your comment. Your theme is really that space is a bridge over the craziness of humans. And when you think about aviation, the impact of GHGs in the atmosphere, and you've kind of touched on climate, just if you have some more comments about initiatives that you're doing in that arena.
I did not get exactly what you're asking.
Greenhouse gas.
Greenhouse. Okay, this is, I thank you for that question. I had terrible discussions with our Earth observation director for years. I asked him, I don't say his name, what are you doing against, what is ESA doing against climate change? And he always said the same, Jan, we are doing a lot. I said, what? We are observing methane in atmosphere. I said, no, I'm asking what are you doing against it? Yeah, we are also observing the ozone. I said, no, not observing, it's a different word. I'm asking for what are you doing against it? And he did not answer. And then I had to look for myself for one. And one example is where really space can make a big difference is by using navigation, Earth observation, and telecommunication, for instance, to avoid contrails. Because contrails of planes is about 5% of the overall clouds of the world. 5%. So, and water vapor is very efficient concerning climate change. So therefore, it's not realized right now, but by going in that direction, I believe one can do a lot. The other thing is we have with the aviation, we have of course also the question how to substitute kerosene in future, and not only by synfuels. Synfuels is a good step forward, but you still have the CO2 problem. You don't have the sulfur and all of this, but the CO2. But we can think about also hydrogen. Either burning or using it for fuel cells. And I believe there space activities and aviation come together, because in space, especially in Ariane, we are using hydrogen all the time. The main stage of Ariane is powered by hydrogen, liquid oxygen, and therefore this could be also a link. We have to say another thing, even a dirty rocket like the Soyuz, which is burning kerosene, is only as the CO2 emission is approximately the same. I did today with a 747 coming from Frankfurt once, and you know how many 747s are flying around. So we have to look to both, and this cannot be an excuse that we are using rockets which are even in higher spheres of our atmosphere are really polluting. We should go for green solutions over there. Did that in any way cover your question? Okay.
Wonderful, thank you. I see a question here in the middle.
It's with a mask, it's difficult
Thank
for me
you.
to understand.
What's the good news? What project or program did you find most satisfying, and why?
Yeah, that's the same question, similar question to what I got earlier from Ellyne.
Yes.
Normally, as a Director General, you should not answer that question, really. You should. No, I'm serious, because think about it. If I would say, yes, that project is for me the very best, then the people of that project might be happy, but all others feel a little bit badly treated. And I always said, I'm the Director General, not the Director Special. And I meant it. But I told you that. So this Lisa is for me a very special one. I mentioned Bepi Colombo, I mentioned Rosetta. This space debris removal program, because it came from scratch, we had to start it really by discussing with member states one by one in order to come to a solution to really get finances. I can tell you also, sometimes, of course, there are failures also. You always have to stand up one more time, then you fall down. So, for instance, together with NASA, we had an idea to hit the moon of a small asteroid. It's Didymos is the asteroid, and Didymoon is a small moon which runs around the Didymos. And the Americans, because they can better shoot than we, they wanted to have an impact on the moon, and we wanted to observe it, as the Europeans always like to observe only. So, and the name was AIM. And in 2016, we proposed it for the first time to the member states, and the member states did not finance it. So I had to say afterwards, ESA has no aim. But I did not stop. I said, okay, but I'm so convinced that we have to do it for humanity, and therefore I started from scratch again, 2016, and in 2019 we got the money for it. So that's also for me a lesson. You should not stop if you are convinced. You should go on, even if it's hard. So therefore, this is also a nice, you ask for I could give you for each and everything one special mission. I mean, there was, we had so many Earth observation measuring the wind speed close to the surface, which is good for meteorology. So, yes, so there were so many nice things. My biggest, what I think is really incredible, but it's not realized so far, is Mars sample return. You know, Perseverance is on the surface of Mars right now.
One of the Mars rovers, Perseverance?
Yeah.
Yes. And so the Mars sample return mission, what does that bring to it?
So Perseverance is the rover which is on the surface of Mars right now, together with a small helicopter. And this rover is looking for nice samples and putting them in small tubes and just lay them down on the ground. So they will be on the ground of Mars. And then the plan is that a European rover comes along, collecting all of them. That's already a challenge. Bringing them to a small launch base where an American rocket is waiting, getting all these tiny probes into a bigger one, like a football, in a canister, and then will fly into the orbit of Mars, and then give this canister, this
football,
this box or whatever you call it, free, because gravity is much better than everything else. So it will only, this box will fly around Mars, and then another European mission will come and will pick it and bring it back to America. I mean, this is for me so unbelievable. And I said the same, I'm very careful with my words meanwhile. When I heard about the Rosetta mission to fly to a comet and then land on a comet, I said, this is unbelievable. And the people working on that said, our Director General does not believe in us. So this is, therefore, you have to be careful. There you see, therefore I say I love all of them.
When you describe the Mars sample return mission, I just imagine a bridge on top of a bridge on top of a bridge. Yes.
Exactly. From different countries.
Yes.
Sometimes it's always a problem, you know, that metric or whether you have metric screws or
imperial, yes.
Hi, thanks for the speech. So if ESA finds anything of value in space, it can be information, it can be picture, it can be technology, does it automatically become the owner, and can it profit if somebody else needs it? Like if a private organization wants to buy it from ESA, can it make profits by selling something?
ESA is not selling projects.
I see, but like if it's something of value to a scientific mission or anything that...
ESA is not selling, you get that. You can get the data free of charge. ESA is not selling data, ESA is not selling products. It's also, I personally was very strong involved in the question of Copernicus, the European satellite I mentioned earlier program, what to do with the data. And I said, you see, it must be free and open data access. Why? Because citizens paid already for it. So the data should be free and open. But if industry is using this data to make out of the data an information product, then of course the company should get money for that and not ESA or the EU. So this is also the strategy of ESA.
So you're speaking of value-added products.
Yeah,
So taking the base
the
products
value-added
and
projects,
adding
yes.
some information.
But the basics, they are paid by the public side. So why should somebody pay for it? That's not. There was a discussion. What about if an American company wants to use Copernicus data because the American taxpayer did not pay for it? That was, but I said, okay, forget about that. We want to use also the data from Landsat and others. So if it's a private property, then of course, but the satellites of ESA are not private property, and therefore the data is free and open.
So that brings an interesting topic up. How do you envision public and private companies working together in this space where some data is free and some isn't?
I believe that space agencies have to change and will change. It started already several years ago, and I was a strong supporter for that. In the past, it was the same for NASA, maybe also for CSA and for JAXA and for ESA. Space agencies were research and development agencies and doing also the management by themselves or in cooperation with industry. I mean, a Saturn V rocket was produced by industry, yes, but with very close cooperation and more than cooperation management also by NASA. And that was more or less the same you could find worldwide. That was the way how space agencies were working. So now the question is that the future? And I believe it's not the future. So therefore, this way of working together, from my perspective, will reduce. So the next is to be a partner. So ESA started very early to do public-private partnership. In telecommunication, normally telecommunication market is already strongly privatized. So if there is a new idea to use quantum technology or whatever in telecommunication, then ESA sets up a program, and then we do a public-private partnership. The public is paying, let's say, 50%, and the private is saying 50%. And by that, new technology, and only for new technology, that means before the competition starts. In the competition, we would never do that. Before the competition starts, we do this. And then the company can develop further on that basis. This is role number 2. Role number 3 is to be a customer, a full customer. And I believe this is something which we did with the space debris removal I explained, where we are just a customer, we are buying a service. Then we have also the function to enable countries, enable industry, and there are programs to enable also companies, to also startups. And the last role is of the future for space agencies to be a broker, to really combine, for instance, Canada and Japan and Europe in a program. This is a broker function, and this is something space agencies can do. But of course, very clear, we are going towards more and more commercialization of space. I told you earlier, I had a panel in Colorado Springs where I was the moderator, and I had 5 heads of different space agencies at the table.
Yes.
And I asked the question, what is in 20, 30 years with your agency? And the first one, that was the biggest agency at the table, it was not NASA, said nothing will change, we will do exactly the same as today. I doubt. The next 2 were saying, 20 years, maybe we focus on some areas, like for instance space science, space exploration, etc. And the last 2 were saying, in 20, 30 years, maybe we don't need any longer any space agency. My opinion is between the second and the third answer, because
and meaning that when the space agencies take less of a role, private industry would take a larger role.
Yes, and we see it already. So we see it in telecommunication, we see it in Earth observation, we see it in debris removal. There are companies now, and I expected exploration to be much later, but we see that there's it happening also with privately financed space missions. So it is more and more commercialized and privatized, both. Commercialized and privatized is a different. So both, and I believe this is really the future for space, and a good future.
Very interesting. I see a couple of people.
I see also a couple of people, but no question.
I see a couple of hands raised. Okay, yes.
Hi. Here. Thank you for the talk. My question would be, because the funding and the countries have such a big role in ESA and it's a multinational cooperation, how do sentiments in different countries towards space exploration and all the projects that ESA does, how do they influence ESA's work? Because we see a shift towards more nationalism, more country-dependent projects, and did that over the last few years, that shift that we see in society, does that also influence the work of ESA?
I don't know how you prepared this meeting today, Michael. So the questions are all good. So this question is also, it's difficult for a Director General because sometimes a member state does not support and is even fighting strongly against a mission because they want to do it just nationally. And these are the hard times of a Director General. And I had several times I had it that they said, no, this project is not interesting, not at all, and not only not interesting, also trying to convince other member states not to go into that because they wanted to do it alone. This is really very, very bad. So we have still in ESA very national-oriented activities. It is an advantage if we look to the money because of this geographical return. But it is a disadvantage with regard to the missions we are doing because there is always a discussion also, is it good for my country, so to say. This is not easy, but maybe that's one of the biggest tasks of a Director General to come to solutions for that. And I can tell you just how stupid sometimes, I should not use always these bad words, how stupid sometimes this national thinking is. We have when I started at ESA, I had my presentations always on the lower part, I put all the flags of the different nations because I said, ESA is the member states. That is our foundation. So I put all the flags in the way and the order as they are normally shown at ESA. And when I looked to it, I changed it. Because it started with, it was in alphabetical order, in French alphabetical order. So it started with Allemagne. And I did not find it funny to start it with my nationality. So I moved it to the English version, where Austria was the first, and Germany was then between France and Greece. And immediately I got a very strong reaction against that, not from Germany, but from France, because I was not using the French alphabet. And it took me a while to explain and to resist, because I thought it's really important for me. Now the funny thing is, my successor is from Austria. He changed it back. And the French were happy that the French alphabet is back.
Yes, okay, very good. Do we have any other? Yes.
Thank you for your insight. I want to start with a comment. So this being the first annual Dr. John MacDonald Outer Space lecture. And of course, Dr. John MacDonald was the founder of MDA, MacDonald, Detweiler and Associates. I just want to mention that the cooperation between MDA, the collaboration between MDA and ESA goes many years back, starting at least with the ERS-1 and ERS-2 missions, then with the MVSAT mission. And
Could you bring the microphone a little closer to your mouth?
Yes. Sorry.
I understood that you're asking about cooperation between MDA and ESA. I make it short, your long question.
I was saying,
is that right?
And I was just saying that the previous missions were ERS 1 and 2 going back to the early 90s. Then the MVSAT, and more recently Sentinel-1 and MDA contributed the image processing to the image processing facility.
Yeah, but one has to clearly understand that ESA is a public body and MDA is a company. And therefore, what ESA is doing with companies is working together, cooperating, yes?
Of course.
But in the sense that one is paying and the other one is receiving the money, which means that is not the same as to cooperate between ESA and CSA.
Yes.
That's a different way. So therefore, and of course, MDA is a very strong company, everybody knows that, and therefore it's, we are always happy when we have MDA in a proposal which is then supported by the Canadian Space Agency. So therefore this is for us, of course, very good, because we know that MDA has a lot of experience, etc. But it's not that we select MDA automatically just because it's a nice company. It goes through a tendering process, etc., etc.
For sure. Yeah, so my question was related to the Sentinel-1, the latest collaboration, which was is part of Copernicus. And since you mentioned, if you can tell us a bit more about Copernicus and next, I think there's a few more satellites coming.
Yeah. So the Sentinel is a full row of satellites, and there will be more than just two. Another one. They started with radar satellites, Sentinel-1, and then optic Sentinel-2, and so on and so on. We had then a precursor for some technology in Berlin. So it's a long list of activities. What I don't know, and maybe you know it, because I explained the very special situation of the Sentinel satellites, the A satellites financed by ESA, the B satellites financed by EU. There must be, for that purpose, there must be a special agreement between Canada and the European Union, which I don't know.
I believe most of our collaboration was with ESA, and
yeah,
EU
but ESA
is certainly we would partner if we can, but there isn't that automatic mechanism that there is.
Yeah, but if in the A series a company is selected for something,
yes,
then normally this company gets also
the B.
Yes. But between A and B, the source of money is changing from ESA to EU. So therefore, I don't know how that works. I have to apologize, but I hope that there is a solution. I hope so. I don't know.
I don't. It would depend on which satellite and who were involved. And there are over 20 Sentinel series and multiple satellites in each series. So
some also together with the United States, Jason, which is called Jason and Sentinel in the same time.
Different, yes.
Yeah. So,
do we have any final questions? We have a question over here.
Hi. I have a question about when you were talking about privatization of space, and I was just
bring the microphone a little closer to you.
Is this better?
Yeah, a little bit better.
Oh, okay. So I was just wondering from the privatization of space, because a lot of commercialization and stuff, they would want to ensure profits and maybe cut corners in the future. If we are increasingly moving towards the privatization of space, how would ESA and other space agency ensure that space itself is going to continue being fairly used and not be accidentally kind of destroyed, as one could say from like.
So if I understood your question correctly, is that you believe that the space agencies guarantee that the cost of the satellite is in a certain limit. Is that what you mean?
Or were you more asking if if space becomes very commercialized, how do you guarantee access remains fair and that the common areas in space are usable?
That's the beauty of commercialization, because each and everyone can then afford to go to space. That's my clear understanding. Of course, you see, I'm observing the startup scene worldwide. And there are companies who go really into missions we could never think before. So I told you, a small Bulgarian company which offers the following. You can, if you like, directly ask to get data from an Earth observation satellite which does not exist right now. So they will build the satellite, they will launch it, they will operate it, and they will bring down the data for you. So you can directly buy the data. Or you say, no, I want to have my own sensors also on that satellite. Then they make another package for you. Or you say, I have my own launcher, etc. So this is sometimes something which was never done before, and suddenly it is coming. We should be clear that space should not be just for rich countries. If you mean this one, I'm totally with you. So we also have to see that space is an infrastructure which especially helps also countries, for instance, in Africa, which cannot afford their own mission right now. So therefore, this is something like a moral or whatever you call it. And this is difficult sometimes in the commercial world, but don't trust that the agencies have more moral than the companies. That's not the case. Because the agencies are governed by the different, at least ESA is governed by the different governments, and they have their national interest. And therefore, my big hope is that we come for some understanding also for future debris avoidance. And this is very difficult because, again, the country thinks, no, why should I take care of waste? I just want to have new satellites. So therefore, the question which you have is much broader than you ask for. We should not accept that a few billionaires fill the orbit with their satellites so that others cannot have access. So we should really avoid something like that. And so this is a task, but I still trust and hope in people.
I think we have time for one more question over here.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out for a while how to exactly ask the question I'm going to ask, and I don't think I've figured it out, but I'll do my best anyway. So one of the ways I became very interested in space is sort of following the progress of SpaceX, and one of the things that came out a lot in sort of following that progress and looking into it is there's a lot of sort of people that are in the community of people who follow SpaceX who are very anti the SLS and sort of legacy Apollo programs, and how things get very messy, and they're basically just jobs programs for people in different states. And I felt very reminded about that by your saying that every EU country, they put in some money and then they get some jobs in return. And I guess I was wondering if you could comment on the sort of trade-off that generates when you're trying to get everybody invested and trying to make sure you have political support, but in some cases you might be better able to develop a sort of scale and a sense of mission if you don't have to do that. I hope that makes some kind of sense.
So I admire the success of Elon Musk. I do not admire each and everything what he is doing, but this is another thing we can discuss about that. But he was very smart, and the result is excellent. He was smart in also to get nice contracts with NASA, billions of dollars, for something which he did not have at that time, but he succeeded. He was really smart also to go for the reusability, which is no solution for the Ariane. I could go into detail for that, but it's not a solution for Europe. But it's for him, it's very good because there is an American and a worldwide market he has access to. Also the captive market of the US he has access to, which the Europeans do not have. So therefore, he really used this situation in a way which is really successful. Now, SLS is, of course, a totally different beast. It's really expensive, it's late, and all of this. And one has to look into details what the reason is. A little bit, I can agree that a little bit is the reason that it's managed, again, by public institution. This makes it so difficult. Also for me as ESA Director General, it was so difficult always to see how programs are delayed and delayed and delayed by making them always better and better before launch. And this is not the way Elon Musk is doing. He built his first Falcon 1, he failed. He tried it again, he failed. Normally in Europe we would have 5 years a break and try to get Falcon 1 launched. That would be the European way. And what did he say? He said, I don't build any longer Falcon 1, I build Falcon 9. Yeah, that was the way he did it. So,
yes.
And everybody was saying, and I was there in his workshop with the experts from, at that time, German Aerospace Center. And when we were out, they told me, Mr. Wörner, don't worry, they will never fly. That's not possible in such a workshop. And I said, wait. And he had many failures also. You should not forget about that. But he was always trying hard and going forward. And I heard that never two Falcon rockets were identical, one after the other, because he always made some additional steps. This is a very important solution. While when I tried to convince Ariane group to change the launcher, they said, never change a running team. So that was their answer. So there are different opinions in different organizations. So I think SLS for me is also a nice instrument. It's really a huge thing. We are happy because the service module comes from Europe. So, but you are right, it's very expensive and yeah. But commercialization will be, why should launchers be built by the public side? No, they could be built by by companies 100% and just deliver. I mean, even the cars of the government are not built under supervision of the minister or so. They buy the cars from the shelf. And that's the right solution. But it's a little bit, we go ahead. But I see many small companies, startups going in that direction. I'm really happy to see that. And I have the freedom right now in my position that I'm not any longer Director General, also to link, to support them, to advise them. And I always say a little bit, be aware not of the dog, but of the agencies. If you can do your job without, it's even better. Then you are really commercial.
Well, Jan, thank you so much.
No, I have to thank you. It was the best thing for me today. Yeah. Thank you very much.
So many thanks to Ellyne and Jan for having this wonderful discussion with us today. I want to thank MDA for sponsoring the event very much. I want to also thank the MacDonalds for being here with us today. So let's give them a round of applause too. Thank you. We've also had wonderful support for this evening. We've had the crew who've helped us throughout tonight, and you also saw Andrew and Jed running the microphones back and forth, so let's give them a round too. Thank you. One of the things that definitely sticks out in my mind as I'm trying to process everything that was discussed is all the different complexities that are involved with going to space. It's not just an engineering problem, but there's also a social problem that's associated with it. It's the organization of all these different actors, whether they are commercial or whether they are associated with a particular state directly. And so, one thing that the Outer Space Institute is trying to do is bring together people who are thinking about things such as space in many different particular ways, so that we can identify some of the biggest challenges that we have and also identify the solutions to those problems. This is the first of many John S. MacDonald Outer Space Lecture Series, and I do hope that we will be able to see you again next year in person. Thank you, everyone.